Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Ladies and gentlemen, some guests bring stories, while others bring soul. But today's guest, she brings an entire nation's memory stitched with poetry, grit, and just the right amount of cultural side-eye. She's not just an author. She's a movement wrapped in a metaphor, a storyteller with the precision of a surgeon and the compassion of a motherland. From the vibrant streets of Kabul to the coffee-scented bookstores of Toronto, Ontario, Mina Sharif has lived and written between worlds. And let's be honest, she probably has more stamps on her soul than most of us have on our passports. Now, born in Canada, but shaped by 15 years in Afghanistan and fluent in the language of nuance, Mina has spent her life not just telling stories, but changing the way the world listens to Afghanistan. She's the literary architect behind Your War, Our Lives, a thunderclap of a debut that dares to do what few books ever attempt: hand the microphone back to the people who lived it. Her short fiction has been shortlisted for the CBC Short Story Prize, celebrated by the New Quarterly and the Bangalore Review, and whispered about by anyone who's ever tried to write something that matters. She's a cultural consultant, a former Sesame Street producer, yes, you heard that right, and a keynote speaker who's probably given more truth in 30 minutes than some of the world leaders give in a year. Now, whether she's being featured on The Agenda, CBC Radio, or Al Jazeera, one thing's clear: Mina doesn't just write stories. She reclaims narrative real estate, and does so with a clean poise, piercing honesty, and just enough shade to keep the conversation spicy. Her latest collection, Your War, Our Lives, isn't just a book. It's a literary lantern for the Afghan diaspora, with illustrations by legendary ArtLords. It's part memoir, part protest, and part love letter to a country often misunderstood and misrepresented. Through her words, the silenced find voice, the overlooked find light, and the broken begin to rebuild. So if you've ever wondered what it looks like when passion, purpose, and plot structure walk into a bar, pull up a chair. Because today we're not just sipping stories, we're brewing a revolution one page at a time. Please welcome the brilliant, bold, bridge-building bard of the borderlands, Mina Sharif. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. It's all I hope to be. All wrapped up in an intro. Thank you.
So I want to dive into it with you here, and we are going to touch on a lot of different parts, so apologize if I jump around in advance. But you've lived in Canada and Afghanistan. How has that shaped where you see home?
Well, I think there's something to be said for where your childhood was spent, feeling a particular level of home, and then, which is Canada for me. And then there's something about, where your ancestors are from that has like a different feeling of home. And that's what Afghanistan is to me. So for a long time, I grappled with which one's more home,
Hmm.
but I've kind of landed at they're both home in two very significant ways. Childhood, that's nostalgia. That's what I recognize and I'm a part of. And that's not even just Canada, it's very specifically Scarborough for me. And then in Afghanistan, that kind of developed as a reconnection in adulthood.
It's neat how you phrase that, where we have this nostalgia to the place where we grew up versus what I'll say is a calling of culture, right? Is that?
That's really well put.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you went abroad for about 15 years and then you came back, what was the hardest part of returning for you?
Oh, I think it was really startling to me that I wasn't as Afghan Canadian diaspora as I thought I still was, meaning like I had really changed a lot more than I thought in Afghanistan, and really assumed that I would kind of seamlessly go back into Afghan Canadian lives in Scarborough. And suddenly I couldn't relate to people in the same way. And because I had always seen myself as somewhat of an outsider in Afghanistan, just from my the dual identity kind of thing, coming back, I still saw myself as the Canadian Afghan, and suddenly I wasn't quite the same as the rest of the Canadian Afghans anymore. It was difficult to see it and then to sort of work around that.
Why did you phrase it that way? Like you came back, you said, you're not really fitting in with the Canadian Afghans who are here after you've come back. Why did you feel that way?
I think it's it's because I wasn't giving enough credit to my lived experience and really always in Afghanistan trying to remain humble and understand that I did not grow up as the local community did. So I was kind of approaching everything that way. And I didn't really stop and like kind of absorb how much it had affected me. I mean, 15 years is a long time. It's where I grew into my adulthood. And so when I came back, I was meeting people who, unlike me, had really depended on headlines and
Mm.
sort of hearsay or the internet for their knowledge about Afghanistan or their connection to Afghanistan, whereas mine was a lot more a part of me now. And it made it hard to relate to what I would call my community here.
It's interesting that it's when you come to your community here, we're reading headlines and news and social media posts, but you were there and you're able to say, well, that's what you've read. I was there. It's not exactly what you're seeing here. And then you might have some different types of conflict between your own community here and what you actually know from back. Did you ever feel that you struggled between two identities at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was startled to hear that I had two, or to see that I had two identities. I kind of, at all times in Canada, kind of realized I have an Afghan culture that I'm really proud of, along with the rest of the diaspora who's quite proud. And then in Afghanistan, kind of being like, well, I grew up outside of here, but I'm so happy to learn and absorb and learn and absorb. So realizing that I had actually also become so much more of an Afghanistan influenced human being than I'd originally thought was more sudden. So I didn't struggle with it because the whole time I was there, I thought I'm the Afghan Canadian. So I didn't struggle with, not belonging there as much as I think some people who had hoped for that. Some people had gone to Afghanistan and hoped to fit right in. I hadn't. I really, really went there with I felt like a really determined awareness, like maintaining that awareness that I didn't grow up here and to never imply that I had, or to never imply more of to never imply that I could relate to things that the local community had in ways that I couldn't.
And while you were there and then you came back, what do you think was the biggest thing you had to unlearn? I mean, again, people are reading headlines and news articles and not necessarily having the opportunity to go there and connect and come back. You did when you left Afghan and came back to Canada. What was the biggest thing that you're like, oh, I have to unlearn this or relearn that?
Yeah, I had to I think I tried to create like a path where I wasn't seeing one, right? So I thought I could kind of go where some friends and some others go after they've been to Afghanistan. They kind of come back and they're annoyed that no one knows anything, or no one knows as much as they do, or empathizes as much as they'd wish for people to. Or I could just kind of let Afghanistan go, as some people do, just to kind of deal with the pain of the loss. And I kind of tried to forge a new path where I was saying, okay, I do know a lot about this side, and I also still relate very much to being an Afghan Canadian because it's still so ingrained, it's part of me too. I kind of challenged myself to be a bridge. And so I feel like I'm in a new place where I don't have a lot of company. So we're trying to figure it out. But yeah, I think I just saw that I had not many choices, but all the choices kind of meant letting go of one or the other of identities that mean a lot to me.
But when we talk about your book, Your War, Our Lives, and when we talk about trying to push away different identities that we have, how is it that you were able to keep the passion to get the collection of short stories that seek to paint the nuance and the deeply human portrait of Afghan experience moving beyond headlines?
So I was saying like when I came back, I kind of felt like a little bit startled by how different I was from people who cared about Afghanistan but just didn't have the same access that I'd had. Um, I saw that kind of potential to get into a lectury or dismissive role wasn't something that I wanted. I wanted to be a part of like, okay, I see that disconnect. Let me be a part of changing that. So fiction for me was kind of a relief, a release to say, you're missing all these details of life there. You can't just paint it as safety or violence, or, having all these binary descriptive victims or heroes, or all of those words that are very related to, I think, war and conflict. Um, and if I wanted nuance to exist, the only way that I could really do that was painting a picture of the scenes that I want you to feel connected to. And that's just not something you can say from your perspective necessarily very easily. And that's how I went into fiction being like a tool to say, here, this is what I'm talking about.
It's neat that you've put it this way, where you didn't want to go into a lecture vibe, right? You come back and say, "Hey, I've learned all these things. Now let me lecture you on it. We're going to create this different type of medium to explore." And it's really unique how you use the word people just reading certain parts and just going, "Hey, it's violence. It's more than this." Why do you think that we read a headline and then all of a sudden we assume we know everything?
I think we all have that tendency. And especially if we've heard headlines repeatedly, or it just starts to feel like a fact. And I think we need to all be kind of accountable for that being part of who we are. And we can say that the media does this to us, that'd be a fact, but also at the same time, we hold some responsibility. I mean, I can think of conflict-ridden countries that I don't know a lot about. And probably the first thing I think is it's pretty violent there. It's pretty scary there.
Mm.
Even while I'm someone who, actively chose to live in Afghanistan during the war, I still have to stop myself and say, well, how much do I actually know about this country? And yeah, it's hard to say everyone's homework is learn about every single country inside out and learn their political history and all the nuances, but we at least can recognize that headlines are not giving us a full story of anywhere.
Do you feel that having these headlines and what I'll refer to as this misinformation that comes out, I mean, the title being Your War, Our Lives, where did we come up with this title? Is it just, based off of these headlines that everyone says? It says, no, you're actually missing it here.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to be literal and say, yeah, because the war is a part of every single person from Afghanistan's life, whether they've never seen the country, whether they were, two generations out. It doesn't matter. Why are they two generations out? It's to do with war, right? So we're all affected by it. But as far as when I say your war, I mean yours as in people that are not the citizens who have to actually, have the repercussions or the effect of that war, whether it's politicians, whether it's in different countries that interact with Afghanistan in political spheres, whether it's geopolitics. There's so many different,
Mm.
I would say, ownerships of what war is, but it's definitely not the citizens, the ones who really are looking to just um, take their own personal lives to a place that has nothing to do with war. The backdrop is not them. The backdrop is um, the your. That's where that comes from.
It, I love that there's a lot here, and I love this when it's one, we probably should learn a lot more about other cultures and countries and things along these lines and not just believe the first clickbait that comes along. But why the book? Why now? Why not a movie? Why not a short film? Why not Scream on top of the CN Tower? Why this type of medium?
Well, honestly, it just kind of happened organically. I was writing is something that I hadn't done in a really long time, but I really felt strongly about scenes that stuck in my head, more so than I felt about, these are facts I need you to learn in order to care about Afghanistan. And that wouldn't work on me. So I tried to think about what would work for me. And a lot of times when I read fiction that's placed somewhere and they kind of give me a vivid idea of what the textures and smells and tastes and just kind of bring it alive for me, I feel a new connection to that country, even if I've never been there, or that setting, I should say. So I was doing that to paint that setting almost for myself after the fall of Afghanistan. I started to add more short stories just as a form of relief. And once I started sharing it with a few people who I really felt their opinion would either shut my writing down or encourage me, because these are people who actually grew up in these settings, and to show them what you've written about it an observer to a point, right? Is It was a little scary, but when I did, it did resonate. And then I realized, you know what? I have a unique lens and I do need to use it.
So you mentioned that you have these scenes and a different way of learning and absorbing the information, which I think is fantastic. Write how you would want to be spoken to, I guess is what I'll say. So it makes it easier or more consumable. But when we talk about these scenes and then we talk about the stories that you have in the short stories throughout the book, are there stories that you have left out that said, "Hey, you know what? That one we're not going to go ahead and put there. We're going to change it."
Honestly, yeah, there was a few. There was a few where whenever I found myself like kind of guessing what that character felt like, more so than feeling confident that I had been around it close enough that I felt comfortable. I'm still guessing at the end of the day. I'm not a young orphan boy, and I'm not a woman. I'm not any of these characters. So, but if I was kind of reaching or not sure, or I hadn't kind of felt this energy close up before, I did put those ones away, at least for the time being. These are all stories that just came very organically to me from scenes that I have lived or been in.
So, what is the best scene that you've been in or lived in from these stories or scenes?
Ooh, that's a great question. So there's one scene, and it's not in my favorite story by a long shot, but there's one scene of someone who's coming back to Afghanistan from time in the West. And I feel like he's a little bit insecure, a little bit defensive about his identity because, is he very westernized now as he returns? That very much speaks, of course, to me. And in this scene, or like this one moment, he looks up and sees a cat jumping from one rooftop to another and kind of just looks at that cat and says, "That's an Afghan cat." And he knows he's an Afghan cat, and no one could tell that cat that this is not his city. And I've had that moment that was taken from myself. I've had that moment where I was there and I was kind of the "Am I Afghan enough" feeling would creep up, and I'd see an animal or a rose or a something and say, like, "This is from here, and so am I." It would never question that it's an Afghan cat or rose or whatever else. And so I put that scene in the book as well.
And what's a scene that you feel that you've learned the most about yourself when you were writing it?
Oh, what taught me about myself? Ooh, there's one that's about a Western raised Afghan visiting Afghanistan for the first time. So she's like never been before. And I laughed while writing that so much because she was all about like the visuals and just very touristy energy. And I had that, I'll be open and candid and say I had that right until the end of the 15 years. I mean, I had the whole time I was doing things like, "Ooh, look at those textiles. Ooh, wow, look at this food. Let me get a shot of it on video." And that's just from, it comes from a good place. It comes from really just being so excited to see things that you've heard about or imagined, but now in person. But you also look a little silly to people who don't expect that from you. So that story taught me, oh, this is how I've looked the entire time.
Now, you've brought up the word energy a few times, and so my question for you is that when we talk about energy and emotional well-being and health, when you're writing these stories, and some of them are very heavy material, how do you take care of your emotional well-being when you're doing this type of writing?
Oh, I this type of writing feels very good to me because I'm able to include what's usually so left out, right? So when I include like a moment of joy that a character has or the strength behind the person in situations that people talk about all the time, but like, hey, let's get to know the person,
Mhm.
whether it's like the driver who drives around the international staff. I feel actually quite excited. It's not a toll on me. The toll on me is more so when, um, let's say I'm in an interview or I'm being asked to contribute information about Afghanistan, but it's being asked in such a simplistic way that really frustrates me because it's not offering space for the rest of those details and the rest of that reality.
So when we talk about those types of questions, and of course I have a bunch of them, but we do end up, to your point, where we just read headlines or we're only showing what we choose to see type of a thing. When we look at this, what do you feel is the biggest misconception that people have about Afghanistan or Afghan people?
Um, I don't think it's anyone's fault. I will start with that too, because I think all the time about what would I have thought of Afghanistan and its people if I only had that to go on. I can't quite imagine it, but I can at least empathize with, okay, I'd have a simplistic view, right? So I think that's the biggest misconception that there's just we're expected to be this monolith. So, I'm asked often as an Afghan woman, and I think like, I can't represent all of them, guys. I can just tell you about my opinion. And I don't see that doesn't always happen. That doesn't happen when we talk about every single country. It's just because we have Afghanistan, the war zone, woman answer based on all of those things. So I can see how it happens. I understand how we get there. And the biggest misconception is just that we have more information than we actually do.
And what do you feel that people really should understand or appreciate more about the Afghan culture?
I mean, I don't even task that, right? Like, you want to learn about Afghan culture? I'd be so flattered and honored. You don't want to learn it? That's cool too. But like, let's start with, they have a culture that they care about that's being currently in the oppression that is, taking over Afghanistan. That's being taken away from them. It's a 5,000-year-old culture. So just even having that understanding that it exists and it's not just people sad about war or like really crazy savages who fight off everybody. We need just in between there. I'd love for people to recognize that there's a whole world. That's it. You don't want to learn about the world. I'm okay with that. I don't know about every country either. So, but I do recognize that there's nuance in all of them, or I try to.
No, the exact opposite. Everyone should learn more. Get out there and ask Mina, how can I learn more?
Yeah, I'm like, no, don't learn. No, but go ahead, definitely. But just, I think we need to take the pressure off each other when we're talking about advocacy and support and, how can we be there for you? I always answer that with, no, like relax. You don't have to call your senator tomorrow and get involved politically. Let's start with just that feeling of connectivity because that's naturally going to turn you into an advocate. When you go on YouTube and you like maybe watch some Afghan recipes or you watch some dancing or music, the next time you see a headline that says something like the Taliban are I don't know, burning all the musical instruments and they're because they do that. You're gonna say, well, Afghan people love music. I saw this video and that video, or I heard like I think culture is a really good it's a really good path to caring. And then once you care, you're just naturally gonna be someone who knows better and maybe speak up and maybe not. But I think people tend to jump way ahead into like, give me a task to do. And I that's where I think we lose interest and we lose the allyship.
I feel that when we say, here's this task to complete, and then I go off and I do that task, I've contributed, I've helped. Look at me, I'm there because I've checked this box. But what I'm hearing you say is that, hey, why don't we just be friends? Let's grab a cup of coffee and learn about each other. And then that will eventually evolve into this organicness of you'll want to care for me and I will want to care for you.
Yeah, I mean that's where I come from, but that doesn't mean that we don't need, people to contribute financially to the food crisis, or that it's amazing that we have so many advocates, activists who go and they go to the European Parliament and they have meetings and conferences and all these kind of things, and they get work done. They got, the gender apartheid recognized as a gender apartheid. Everyone's got kind of their own path. This happens to be mine, where I'm most comfortable saying, let's spark the conversations so we
Mhm.
can start to develop, these organic, not connections even yet, but curiosity about each other.
And when we talk about these organic conversations, have you ever stopped somebody mid-sentence or mid-conversation and just been like, you're just wrong? And been, this is it actually over here.
That's a very bad habit of mine, and I will confess I do it, yes. Or at the very least, I tune out. And I'm trying not to do that because I think if you can catch someone who's got good intention, then maybe let them say it and ask them a question back and work on those conversation skills. But to be honest, a lot of times people are telling me about Afghanistan, not asking me about it. And I have to conserve my energy too. If somebody wants to tell me that we're nothing more than a war zone, I'm just gonna let them, I'm gonna let them have that.
And when we talk about questions, if you had to say, here are the, let's say, top three questions that you wished people asked about Afghanistan or Afghan, what would those three questions be to be more educated, to learn more, to be more helpful?
Oh, wow. It's a beautiful question. I think I'd make sure that at least one is sort of cultural. Like, hey, what's something that a lot of people do for fun in Afghanistan? What would a weekend look like for the average family? So you can kind of start to visualize real human beings in this scenario. Um, Culture is very big to me again because, and I don't mean it as anything specific, but culture helps us to imagine things through food and music and sort of those headlines that we or those through those titles that we have kind of everywhere. The umbrella of culture in every country kind of helps you relate to people because, oh, that's the snack you guys like to eat at recess. This is the snack we like to eat at recess. So if people asked about sort of daily life a little more, um, that actually might cover all three of my questions. I'd love three questions about daily life, and then I think that would do a lot of good.
So, okay, let's ask them then. While you lived there, what was the daily life for you like?
Put me on the spot. So, yeah, and here we go into this is why I don't do things like biographies or, make it about my experience because it's not the average experience. Granted, there's no such thing as one experience that speaks for every person from Afghanistan, but I was there as a Canadian citizen with a job lined up at most of the time, not all the time, and living in much better conditions than a good portion of the population. So it always all of these disclaimers have to be put in before we talk about what my day looked like. But depending on which job I was with at the time, over 15 years, I've had many of them. I was happy that mine always included movement, like in the city. I've never lived on a compound. I've never lived on a like overly protected base, which a lot of people did. Um, and the movement and interaction with the city was completely cut off in that version of life. And so I'm really happy to say my version included the grocery store or the vegetable market, open markets, things like that. So I'm really happy that I did that. My day was a lot of times at work in front of the computer, like it would be here.
Now, in your book, first, when is your book going to be available for mass consumption?
Oh, thank you. It will be available August 1st. So just kind of creeping towards that fourth anniversary of the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. And I think it's a time where we have needed for all these 3 years prior as well, lot more soothing for us as an Afghan community, recharging kind of by remembering who we are, what's so powerful about us. And then also too, offering people who are curious something other than, hey, these are all the horrible things that are going on, and we shrug our shoulders, and then it's August 16th and we don't care anymore. So
Something that I found while going in here was this humanizing of Afghan men. You have a collection that kind of dismantles the monolithic stereotype of oppressive Afghan man. And we see fathers who are immensely proud of their daughters and brothers who are conflicted but protective and husbands who are loving partners. When we look at this, was that a Why was that important for you to include to make sure that these portrayals are gentle but revolutionary and kind of normalic?
Oh, I so sincerely appreciate you picking up on that. Um, I think Afghan women are recognized as being in a place of suffering. I think in theory, we all support Afghan women and their basic human rights that have been cut off. Like, I mean, we're there for them, but there's a mass comfort with since with the stereotyping of Afghan men that is inaccurate as kind of these savages towards their families,
Mhm.
towards incoming armies, to whether it's even seen as a positive at times is not, still doesn't make it any more accurate. Um, and I used to kind of think, am I the exception with this wonderful, gentle, amazing father? But wait, and all my uncles and all my cousins? And then, you kind of look around and then you move there. And even with moving back, I remember meeting a number of times, kind of seeing someone and also myself kind of thinking, he's not going to like me. This guy with this big long beard and this turban, and he's going to meet me, this random Afghan Canadian girl who's traveling alone, and he's not going to like me because I have it in my head too that he's very strict and very overly religious and judgmental. I have it. We all have that. And then I'd meet them, and they half an hour later, they've told me how proud they are of me, have told me a million jokes, they're super sweet and gentle. And I thought, like, if I have more to undo, as much as I love my country so much and everyone in it, then we need to start addressing like and if you talk to people from Afghanistan, they'll all be telling you what you're reading here and what I'm telling you that that no, it is very, very, very broadly stroked sort of Afghan men are bad, and we don't actually live that.
You won't see that in the news headlines, so unfortunately, we can't believe you, right?
No.
Um, so when we talk about this book, and it's coming out in August, which is amazing, it's going to be available absolutely everywhere. When people read this book and they're going to be sold out within 2 weeks, right, everybody out there? What is something that you feel that is what are the three takeaways that you hope what I'll refer to as other cultures are going to take away from this? I'm going to pick up the book. I'm going to read it. What do you hope are the three main things that you hope I take away from it?
Oh, okay. Well, number one, what you just brought up earlier, sort of the a new a new positive look at Afghan men, for example, seeing them in a new light, seeing the possibility of them in a new light, at least, right? Um, and it wasn't like very core, but in my as far as the list of what my hopes are, it is very core. That's a big one for me. I think if I said, hey, I wrote a book that shows Afghan men in a positive light, no one would pick it up, but it's in there, and I hope they get a little bit of that. um, I want people to be curious after every single story about that area of the Afghan community, whether it's children or those who live in poverty, those who are in media, those like just sparking curiosity would mean a lot to me. And I'd also like for people to get from it, non-Afghans,
Hmm.
that Afghans love their country. They're not just born with this need and desire to leave. There is no desire to leave. It's a desire to be safe. And that's a misconception I had. I'm going to be quite honest. When I was growing up in Canada, kind of assumed everyone would want to be in the position I'm in, living in the West and safe and sound and all of, no, that's absolutely not true.
Now, when we look at this, do you feel that a reader who might be unfamiliar with the context of the international presence of Afghanistan might miss the full weight of certain moments in the book?
I don't really care because there's so much about the war already. And if you've been living under a rock and you didn't realize it was the world's longest war for 20 years that Canada was involved in, and the US and like a million other countries, then I'm just not going to task myself to tell you the grueling details of war. So I think there's enough of it in every story because it affects everybody's life, whether they're in a scenario of um, having dinner with their family or going on a picnic or whatever else it is. It's there. It's always there. So it being more subtle should not mislead anybody into thinking that I don't know, I'm not calling it safe.
When we look at your project, is there anything in there that you wish you added that you didn't, or that you had in and that you removed and said, you know what, that one we'll save for volume two?
Yeah, there's one that's staying for a hope for volume two. Um, there's a couple that I don't know if I just don't like them anymore because I've seen them too much. So I don't know anymore. I don't look at them anymore. I'm waiting for discussions to happen, but no, there's not content that I regret including.
And when we look at this project and we look at all the interviews that you're about to be going forth and doing, and all the books clubs and all the outlets that you're going to go to, what is something that is very common or that you find is common that people tend to ask you as an Afghan woman? It's what's that one question that always seems to come up?
Ooh. Okay, and a tough one is why aren't people rebelling and taking things into their own hands and taking their rights back, like why do they want us to come in and do it? And they don't phrase it quite like that, but that's give or take, that's what I am asked in a lot of circles. And I think it's fair given what information they're working with. And my answer to it is that that it's complicated. Number one, that when people have been through generations of war, because this is not like it started in 2021 and before that we were all on the beach. It's been so many generations that it almost takes time to absorb how bad something is before you can find the strength to sort of demand more, right? There's also like you just can't have that expectation of people. And so what happens in the Q&A is then they'll say, well, what about Afghan men? Why aren't they standing up for the Afghan women? I get asked that a lot. And to a point, fair. I also wish that they'd all kind of congregate and go and take care of the women's rights just in one big,
Hmm.
you know, heroic sweep, but that's also complicated. They're not armed. They're also threatened. They're threatened with violence. The women who protest are told that your family, the men in your family are in danger. And so like there's that to be considered, but it's also that you're not seeing the rebellion or the demand for rights that does exist. Little boys were refusing to go to school until their female classmates could go to their school. There were men in the early, on TV who masked themselves in solidarity with women who now had to be masked on television. So every answer, I wish I could have given a shorter one even here, but even when we have this conversation in talks and in groups, this is a conversation that kind of does take us into the direction of what does war actually do to a population, right? And if we're not going to consider it, then it's not fair to even ask me, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? Well, you're speaking from a perspective of no threat, no war, and you just can't ask me it.
So, what's a question that you wish people would stop asking?
That one. Besides that one, um, how do Afghan women feel? Ugh, that one bothers me so much. I think on one hand, yes, lot can we just like be logical? They don't have human rights. They can't go outside. They can't exercise. They can't go to many of their jobs are no longer available to them. They can't study anything. They can't study all of the things that they used to be able to study. Like, I mean, how would anyone feel?
Mm.
That's kind of what I want to answer. So I wish they wouldn't ask that. And then also, too, different women feel different ways about it. To be honest, they're almost all in very bad shape, emotionally, mental health wise. And so that's kind of it's pretty much a consensus, but to different degrees too, right? Like some are angered by it and want to keep fighting, some are exhausted by it, some are, suicidal from it. So I can't answer for big groups. I wish I'd not be asked to do that.
And what's something that you wish people did ask you?
Mm, what do I wish people would ask me? I don't know. I like questions. I don't have a favorite one. I don't have a favorite one. No, but I like people's natural curiosity. I like a weird question every now and then. What have you always wondered about Afghanistan? I had someone ask me if they have pet stores there. I thought that was such a brilliant question because I don't know if I would guess that there would be pet stores in Afghanistan or veterinarians, sorry,
Mm.
specifically. And yes, there are veterinarians, there's veterinary studies in the universities. There's pet stores as well. People love pets in Afghanistan, believe it or not. And sometimes you need a little detail like that to have that humanizing, as much as I hate that word, but humanizing.
And with all of your work and all of your travels and all of your experience, what's a question that no one's asked you that you just wish they did?
Oh, I usually volunteer what they don't ask. So I'm not sure I've ever been, that never gets really pent up for me. Um, but sometimes I wish someone would ask me like, what's a really fun, strange fact about your experience in Afghanistan? And then I could like hit them with some
So
flashy
what
little
what is a fun,
facts.
strange fact? Yeah, from your experience. What is it?
The very first time I had Cambodian food was in Kabul, Afghanistan. Authentic Cambodian food. I'd never had it in all of my years in Toronto, where, we're the hub of multicultural food. I went to a Cambodian restaurant in Afghanistan with beautiful, delicious Cambodian food cooked by a Cambodian chef. And that kind of, shakes up the image that people have of Afghanistan pretty quick.
And when you wake up in the morning, what type of coffee do you grab?
Um, I do love the second cup. If I'm treating myself.
Mm.
Yeah, the second cup, and they also have and it's not a coffee, but they have this matcha that you could put rose in.
Mm.
Thank you for saying some people are like, ugh, but
Oh.
it's actually really good. It's really, really good. And I like supporting a Canadian brand.
And I have time for one last question for you, Mina, and thank you so much for being with me today. Is what makes you smile?
If being myself, being all of the different things I am, all of the things I am are okay. I think I spend a lot of time trying to decide which one I am more. Am I more this or am I more that? Or am I more this identity or more that one? And I just don't care anymore. And now it's so much fun because I'm all of them at any given time, however anyone feels about it.
What makes you smile is you being you. I love it. It's fantastic. As I said, that was the last question I had for you today on Coffee with Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. I'm excited for your book to hit the market, Your War, Our Lives, coming out in August of this year. Let's get it sold out, everybody out there. Again, remember to smile to inspire and have yourselves a fantastic day. Thank you so much, Mina, for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.